Hello, and welcome to Book Circle. I'm Earl Weinberg. This time, we will continue reading The Demon Priest by Jim Burrows. Our narrator, Lee, has run across this priest who sometimes looks human and sometimes looks like a devil. But she's decided to become his assistant. And right now, she is assisting him in finding a lost boy. We made our way across Bleecker Square. It was dark and drear and kind of spooky in the fading light, an old park that's seen much better days, slowly earning its name, definitely Bleecker. The street leading away on the other side had once been cobbled, and the blacktop was so worn that the stones showed through in many places. Brownstone buildings lined both sides of the street. A few were in decent repair, but several looked like the back entrance to some place with no front door. About halfway down the block, a voice called out of the darkness of one of those stoops, "Hey, Father, how about you and your little friend go home now?" We paused and turned to see a pair of dark figures on the steps, one standing, leaning against the wall, the other squatting on the steps. "Perhaps we shall, once we find the young man we're seeking." "Perhaps," he says. "Maybe he needs an invitation, or an introduction." "Yeah," came another voice from basement steps to one side of the stoop. Dark figures came up the steps on both sides. I was beginning not to need voices telling me we were in trouble. Not that well, never mind. You know. "If you can assist us, we'd be most grateful. Do you know where we could find young Theo Johnson?" "What do you say, boys?" Someone chuckled. The hair on the back of my neck stood up like electricity was crawling up it. A dark van pulled up behind us. The priest reached out, laid a hand gently on my arm. He didn't need to. I was holding myself back just fine. I heard a van door slide open behind us. Rough hands grabbed me from behind. The priest turned effortlessly in the hands that gripped him and pushed. I saw the guy who'd held him bounce off the far wall of the van as I was pulled back into it. "There is no need for violence," he said, and stepped lightly into the van, so unexpectedly that a guy who tried to shove him in missed his footing and fell to his knees halfway into the van. The priest sat on an upturned milk crate. "Release my assistant," he said, as two more guys got in with us. The grip on my arms was relaxed, and I sat suddenly on the bare floor of the van. One of the guys pulled out a couple of black cloth bags. "No." The guys looked from the bags to one of the guys behind me. Someone back there grunted, and he put them away. "We could take you home if you agree to let all this drop," said someone, probably the grunter. "No, thank you all the same." "Have it your way." We drove for a while, ending up somewhere in the Waterside warehouse district from the sound of things. The guys by the door opened it and got out, and the priest followed them. Hands pushed me out. "No need to push," said the priest, turning around as he did. The guy behind him, who was trying to do just that, found himself pushing empty air and stumbled to his knees. The priest offered him a hand up, which he slapped away before getting awkwardly to his feet. We made our way into one of the warehouses. There was a large open space, cluttered with crates and stuff, and then a wall of hanging plastic sheets. The sheets parted, and a guy dressed like some sort of a doctor, white lab coat, stethoscope, some sort of six-pointed red curlicue on his chest, walked out, followed by 3 or 4 more guys. "What's the meaning of this?" the doctor demanded. "They're asking a lot of questions." "So you brought them here?" He closed his eyes briefly and sighed. "I've come for a young man, Theo." "I'm sorry, you're here for nothing." The doctor turned to the fellow who'd just come out behind him, a nasty-looking fellow dressed all in black. "Take them all away." Someone grabbed me from behind again, and I saw 3 or 4 guys go after the priest. It got all kind of crazy at that point. The priest sidestepped this way, then that, and his attackers tripped all over each other to get at him. He brushed one aside, and that guy went tumbling back. "Get them out!" yelled the doctor. The priest pushed one of them aside and stepped behind him just in time for that guy to get shot by one of his own men. The priest kneeled down, and a guy coming at him from behind tripped over him and fell to the ground. The father rose and spun around as the last guy standing near him got shot. There were a lot of guys running in now, several with guns. Suddenly I felt cold metal pressed against my neck, just below the jaw. The priest pulled off the crucifix from around his neck and threw it in my direction so fast I could barely see it. The guy behind me screamed, and a gun clattered on the floor. The attackers were closing in on him. One guy in the back shot the guy closest to him as the priest whirled around again, and then half a dozen were upon him. "No!" he yelled, and suddenly all of his attackers were flying backward through the air, leaving him standing alone, horned, tailed, red, his arms thrown back and wide, his long black coat flapping like wings. Someone screamed and screamed. Voices laughed maniacally. He charged, backhanding the nearest attacker, then whirled and kicked another. Someone started shooting again. The sound echoed all around. The screaming and the voices continued. He spun and kicked, jumped, slapped, and backhanded. His nails sunk deep into one man's flesh before he tossed him into the path of semi-automatic gunfire. It all gets kind of blurry about then. I stopped screaming, and the voices gibbered quietly in the back of my head. Bodies lay scattered all around. Somewhere along the line, the doctor had vanished. The priest strode faster than I could run to the plastic wall and tossed shreds of it away in both directions, revealing more than half the warehouse was filled with semi-transparent cubical plastic tents. He stopped and turned around to face me, flesh-colored and hornless. "Remember, no horns, never horns," the voices gibbered softly in the background. Sirens blared in our direction. The priest strode over to where I'd been standing earlier and retrieved his crucifix from the eye socket of the guy who'd been holding me. "I suppose we'll have to speak to the police." "Are they coming?" He looked up, reading the air. "Yes, we should hear them soon." He walked to a place near the middle of the room, away from any of the bodies or guns, and turned to face the door, his arms held out wide to his sides. I joined him. After a while, it seemed like ages, sirens and squealing tires announced the arrival of the police. A lot of police. SWAT poured in through the door and fanned out. No one moved. One or two of the doctor's men groaned. The SWAT guys scurried here and there, calling out "clear" every now and then. Finally, once the room was secured, a plainclothes detective, a bulletproof vest under his sports coat, entered the warehouse. He holstered his pistol as he walked towards us. "Okay, you two, what's going on? Father?" "First, I recommend that your men not breach the plastic tents. They may be sterile for a reason. The man who is running this place was wearing a biohazard symbol." "Captain, copy that." "Good. My assistant and I were kidnapped earlier this evening and brought here. The doctor with the biohazard symbol threatened us and then told his men to dispose of us. That didn't go as he expected." The detective just eyed us for a while. "Really? Do you know why you were kidnapped?" "We have been asking around about a young man, the son of a woman who came to my church for help, who went missing in the Bleecker Square area. The doctor wanted us to leave the matter be. I imagine the young man is in one of the quarantine tents." "You imagine, but you don't know?" "No, sir. If I may, what's your name?" "McGarry, Detective Inspector Michael McGarry." "Inspector, may my assistant and I put our hands down?" We'd been standing like that the whole time. I don't know about the priest, but I was getting really tired. The inspector started to walk towards Father Gregory. "Ah, if you're going to search us, the object in my right jacket pocket is not a gun. You'll probably want it as evidence, but I would appreciate it back." The inspector patted him down and then lifted the blood-soaked crucifix out of the priest's pocket. He stared at the priest, saying nothing. "The blood is that man over there." He was threatening my assistant with the gun that is lying next to him. "Really? So you stabbed him with your cross?" "No, I threw it." "And the rest of them? What happened to the rest of them?" "Several of them shot each other. I struck a number. My assistant wasn't involved except as a hostage." Inspector McGarry looked around at the dozen or so scattered bodies, then reached out and fingered the side of the priest's coat, where 2 bullets had passed through without hitting him. Really? You struck a few, and the others were shot by their friends? They may not have been friends, but yes. By now, there were a couple of EMT teams checking out the bodies and tending to the injured. One of them approached the inspector and spoke to him softly. They walked over and looked down at the bloody bodies. After a while, McGarry returned. Were there any animals present, Father? A dog, perhaps? He asked. Not that I saw, Inspector. One of them appears to have been mauled. McGarry looked down at the priest's blood-soaked fingers. He got real quiet for a while. About that time, we started hearing the clank, clank of Falcon mechs approaching, those big robot suits they use for taking black masks and metahumans into custody, giant metal footsteps crunching into the blacktop. Sure enough, about a minute later, a half-dozen Falcon Special Ops moved in and fanned out, followed by 2 mechs, followed by a couple of agents in the usual bad suits and ties. A big burly white guy who probably played football in high school a couple of decades ago, and a middle-aged, dark-skinned woman who looked like she actually stayed in shape. McGarry didn't look pleased. He made his way over to them. Agents Novak and Jardin, to what do we owe the honor? I don't know, McGarry, said the older guy. How about some priest who takes out a dozen armed thugs, an animal attack by some critter no one saw, and a call for CDC in suits to check out a bunch of quarantine tents? Sounds like something involving extraordinary and metahuman affairs. You know, our jurisdiction? Nope, just a kidnapping, a couple of homicides and assaults, a confession, a witness, and a call for medicos. Not you lot. You didn't need to drop everything and rush over. Trust me, we'll call you when you're needed. Well, said a new voice, Falcon isn't all agents and mechs. I'm Dr. Samantha Abernathy, Falcon Biomed Research, and my team is here with full containment and mobile lab facilities on site. Why wait? The CDC's probably still discussing your captain's request. Dr. Abernathy strode in like a woman in charge, wearing a skin-tight white suit, followed by 4 people in large, bulky biohazard suits. Knock yourself out, Doctor. I'm transporting my prisoner and witness back to the station. Sergeant? Yes, boss, and a couple of cops started escorting us to the police cars outside. And Doc, try and keep your escort from trampling too much of the evidence. McGarry turned to Father Gregory. I'm sorry, but you need me to be handcuffed for the ride. Sorry, thank you for cooperating. I understand. You need to clear all this up. Could you ask someone to see if a Theo Johnson is in one of those tents and let his mother know? I gave her my assurance. Certainly, Father. You, officer, you get that? Yes, sir. The Falcon agent, Novak, looked pretty unhappy, but his partner laid her hand on the inside of his elbow and he just stood his ground as we passed. Not much to say about the ride to the police station or the long wait while Inspector McGarry questioned the priest. A young police officer sat with me and kept the voices at bay. After an hour or 2 interrogating the priest, McGarry and a lady lawyer from the DA's office came for me. She was all buttoned down and looking real professional, real uptight, and kind of dangerous in that safe place sort of way. They took me to one of those interrogation rooms with the 2-way mirrors and read me my rights again, and then asked me to tell them what happened over and over. Did the father kill the guy who was threatening me? Was I in fear for my life? Could he have done something else? Was there an animal present? Who or what tore the one guy's throat? Did I see Father Gregory use a gun? Any other weapon? What did the doctor say? What did the thugs say to him, to us? Did I see anyone else? Any metahumans? Do I know what a metahuman is? Did the priest do anything extraordinary? Could another man have thrown that cross so fast, so hard, accurately? How long have I known him? How did we meet? How long have I worked with him? What's my job? What'd I do before that? Each question repeated several times and asked several ways. They went away and came back a while later with more questions. I guess they checked me out. This time the questions were all about my history, being in the safe place, taking my meds, and stuff like that. I told them that I haven't needed the safe place or the meds in a long time. They went over everything I told them before, asking about details and how sure was I and so on. While they were still asking questions, a nurse and some social worker joined them, and they started asking questions about how did I feel about being kidnapped, about having a gun to my head, about being saved, about talking to the cops and Falcon and all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying that there are any voices, or that there ever were, but you know, if there were any, they'd have been telling me all through this that everything was okay, that I'm strong, that I shouldn't offer anything I wasn't asked about. That's what they would have said, you know, if there were any. The nurse told me she could give me something if I was too anxious or anything like that. I said no, thank you. But not having to talk to, you know, so many people with uniforms and guns might be nice. They nodded at that. The inspector, McGarry, he said that Falcon would like to talk to me at that point, and would I mind? I said I'd rather not. He looked at the DA lady, and they nodded at each other, and he said, not if you don't want to, not now. This is our jurisdiction, and you've been through a lot, but they are the feds. You'll need to talk to them eventually. I asked if the father and me could get back to St. Michael's soon. That'd be a whole lot better for me than some kind of meds or something. They all exchanged looks, and the nurse and the social worker nodded and smiled at the cop and DA. You know, like I was making sense, not like they should be humoring me. Yeah, he's been looking after me, and I've been looking after St. Michael's, and we've got a lot of stuff to do, getting the place all in order and stuff, and well, being busy and looking after each other, that really helps, you know, keeping it all together. Well, he has confessed to killing one person, said the DA lady. You mean the guy who was threatening to kill me after the doctor said to get rid of us? That guy? That's the one. Are you going to charge him for killing that fellow? Can he take me home? He might be able to, said the lady from the DA's. My boss and I are still deciding what charges, if any, to press. There were like a dozen of them with guns. Thought we were going to die. He just protected me. Look, can you sit here for a little longer? Yeah, especially if he takes me home after. I can't promise that, but I think the DA lady saw the look on my face. She exchanged glances with the nurse and the social worker. Look, I'll see what I can do. I sat there trying not to think about the corners of the room or what might be through that mirror for a really long time. I was getting really nervous when the inspector, the lady from the DA's, and the father came into the room. I guess she'd left some time before that. I wasn't thinking about it, but I just jumped up and hugged Father Gregory. Then I remembered where I was and who these people were and where they could send me, and I let go and backed up. I'm sorry, I'm probably not supposed to do that here. He just makes me feel safe, and I looked around, trying not to check out the corners. It's okay, said the social worker. The DA lady said, we've decided that we are not going to press charges, at least today. We have a final decision in 48 hours. We've arranged it so he can go home. He'll need to come back to take this off, the priest said, and pulled up his pant leg to show a small black box strapped to his ankle. But at least I can take you home, or you can stay in the parish house. Oh, please. Everyone exchanged looks and nodded. Then a cop could drive us home, they said, and immediately added, or call a cab. I don't think I was looking too happy at the first idea. Could we just walk back to St. Michael's? I asked. That's quite a few blocks, said the inspector. The walk might do both of us some good. It's been a trying day. Sure, Father. We stopped for Thai food on the way home and ginger ice cream, but other than that we went straight to St. Michael's. I made up the hide-a-bed in the guest room upstairs in the parish house, and the Father let me stay the night. I got hungry in the middle of the night, and the Father came into the kitchen while I was poking through the refrigerator. I'm afraid there isn't much here. No, Father. He smiled, rolled up the sleeves on the robe or nightshirt thing he was wearing, and started going through the cabinets, pulling out flour, olive oil, salt, a few small tins of dried spices, a bear-shaped bottle of honey, and an old cast-iron skillet. "You were very brave today," he said as he set down an earthenware bowl and a big wooden spoon on the counter. "I didn't feel very brave. Can I help?" "No, just pull up a stool and have a seat." He started crushing some sort of seeds and crumbling some leaves from the small tins. He brushed them all into the bowl with some salt and a bunch of flour. "I didn't think they were going to let us go." "Who, the doctor and his thugs, or the constables?" He poured in water and oil and started mixing. "Either." He set the skillet on the stove and lit the gas. "Well, I don't think either of them planned to, not at first." He beat the mixture into the bowl a few last times, then scooped some dough out in his hands and began rolling it into a ball. They saw the light, eventually. He threw the ball down hard on the stone countertop near the edge. It flattened out. He set the wooden spoon on the dough, its bowl hanging over the edge of the counter, and began to roll it out. When it was flat, he washed his hands off in the sink. "Yeah, I guess they did. You, convinced them." "Each in their own way, in their own time." He shook a few drops of water from his hands into the skillet. They hissed and danced. He smiled and poured a bit of oil into the pan and dropped the glistening dough down on top of it. It hissed and crackled. He kept the skillet moving in circles with the crackling dough sliding around inside it. "Could you get down a couple of plates, Lee?" he asked, and then with a quick flick of his wrist tossed the dough into the air, flipped it over, and caught it in the pan. I got down a couple of old heavy earthenware plates from the cabinet. They'd been there when he'd bought the church, but all they'd needed was to be washed clean and put back. I set them on the stone counter next to the stove. He swirled the bread in the pan, then slid it out onto one of the plates and sprinkled a little salt on top of it. It was shiny with oil. In the next few minutes, he cooked up 3 more pieces, oiling the pan each time. "Let them cool down," he said quietly. He took down a couple of glasses from the shelves, poured milk into them, added a bit of olive oil and honey, and stirred them with a spoon from the drawer. He carried the 2 glasses to the kitchen table. I followed with the plates. The father and I ate our meal of bread and milk and honey in silence. Even the voices were silent. I slept well the rest of the night. And we'll find out what happens tomorrow next time.